Good morning. Can you hear me okay? Can you hear John okay? John, say something.
Hello.
Great. Good morning again, and it's really great to be here. How are you doing after 2 full days of conferencing? Great? Oh, right. So, a quick check-in. How many here are here, not here, but at DDD Europe for the first time? Oh, wow, quite many.
Nice.
Yeah, and so, yeah.
Me too.
All right, so just quickly, this talk will run the whole hour, maybe a little later, you'll know why soon, not the 50 minutes, okay? So let's quickly get started. So who are we? I am Xin. I'm that red dot on the slide. I come from Copenhagen, Denmark. I'm a socio-technical architect and independent DDD and change consultant. And John here, he is that blue dot. He comes all the way from Santa Barbara.
Santa Barbara.
Yeah, California. And John is currently the head of product at .work, a startup doing product operating system platform as a product. Well, try to say that 5 times.
A PAP.
Okay.
A PAP.
All right, so John has this extremely or extraordinarily popular newsletter called The Beautiful Mess. Who here have heard of The Beautiful Mess newsletter?
Okay.
Wow. Some? Right, so John is this person that can write faster than most of us can catch up reading. I'm not kidding. So maybe some of us have not written up to 1,000 sticky notes, but John has written 1,000 posts spread over a lot of platforms. And so it has been my dream for a very long time to smuggle John's stuff into the DDD community and John in 3D onto the DDD Europe stage. And there he is in the flesh.
Thank you so much.
Let's give John another warm round of applause. So John, you see, we come from 2 different places, geographically and professionally. Why is it we're doing this together then?
I was stalking Xin on LinkedIn because the posts that she was writing from the DDD conferences seemed incredibly interesting to me. I didn't understand every word she was using, but we do come from different backgrounds. I come from a product management, UX research background. I'm thinking about strategy and products and operating systems and the business and things like that all day. Xin is talking about architecture. She has a background in computer science and a background in engineering. But it turned out that we actually have a lot of overlaps. And I like to say we're both systems overthinkers, not just systems thinkers. We're both obsessed with the mess, just this mess of people and technologies that we experience every day. We both happen to really like our models a lot. Xin loves her models. I like my models too. We consider ourselves glue people. And it turned out that we were actually consulting for the same company without even knowing it, even after I was stalking her on LinkedIn about all the interesting DDD content. And so that sort of sets the stage for today and why we're here. And Xin, thank you so much for inviting me.
Oh, you're so welcome, and thank you for coming. So next up, we're going to give you like 2 minutes version of our individual perspectives into the mess, our lenses to look at the mess, and I'll start. So for as far as I can remember in this career, I've been fascinated by problems being difficult in different ways. You know, just to borrow a little from Dave Snowden's Cynefin framework, and if we just disregard the extreme cases of the clear and the chaotic on the bottom, difficult problems tend to fall into these 2 categories, right? On the left-hand side is the complex domain. It's kind of like this tangle, this ball of yarn you can throw to your cat, and when you get it back, you really cannot tangle it back in exactly the same way, right? So in Latin, complex means plaited together. Com, it's together, and plex is plaited. It's a tangled problem. And on the right-hand side, you have this beautiful Japanese origami-like thing, which is called a complicated problem. And now that thing can be extremely sophisticated with many parts, but you can unfold it and fold it back in exactly the same way. And so that is the nature of a complicated problem, repeatable, predictable, and causal, right? So complicare in Latin, that's literally means fold, to fold together. And why is this interesting for me? So if you look at DDDs, or rather software's problem space, that's a complex problem, right? Why? Because software is used by human beings mostly, and today it's still largely designed and coded by human beings in collaboration, perhaps in wipe programming. And human communication is messy, fluid, and ambiguous. I think we've all, even the two of us, have had meetings and we thought, oh yeah, we agree. And then maybe a few days later, or maybe a few months later, we talked.
She's glossing over the fact that writing this talk together was actually a meta experience of this whole presentation, but continue.
I had my rant, okay. Great. But then I tend to have this bias, well, this is my view. Almost everything we do in DDD is kind of like secretly a process of converting the tangle on the left-hand side, the nasty tangles, toward the right-hand side to become these neat and tidy origami foes. Why? Because software doesn't tolerate ambiguity. It either compiles or it doesn't. It either runs as intended or it doesn't, right? Disregarding if the product manager likes it or not, the developer's understanding will go into production, quoting Alberto Brandolini. So how does DDD solve this problem, right? How does this nudging work? Well, in my mind, if I have to summarize DDD in 3 words, that's language in context, which is also a talk, well, many years back, by Eric Evans. Check it out on YouTube, that's very helpful. So DDD is here to create this shared understanding between all stakeholders, and there are 3 very important practices. That's domain modeling, to converge on a ubiquitous language within these very small special purpose bounded contexts, which is really language consistency boundaries. So these are kind of my realm. So John, it's your turn. How has your journey been through the mess?
Yep. Well, I'll share my perspective. So I'm a product manager, but I've come to understand that the way you work is as much the product as the product itself. So you can see how I started to overlap in this particular world. The second point is that everyone here is a participatory designer of your operating system, of how your company works. You're participating in the design of how your company works, whether you like it or not. The third item is that this is deeply, deeply, deeply unsettling. There's a lot of debates about the system side and the individual side, but if we're all co-designers in our organizations, then that means that the quality of the system reflects some part of us, and that's deeply unsettling, but it's also very empowering. You can think about all sorts of design disciplines that overlap this: behavior design, operations design, ecosystem design, institutional theory, organizational anthropology. There's a bunch of different design disciplines, and it's covered up by our timer there, but I do believe that DDD fits into this broad scheme here. In my day-to-day work, this is kind of a standard set of artifacts I might use. You know, I think about the operating fabric, and these are the practices, the rituals, the sources of information, the interactions, the structures that exist, the cultural signifiers in the organization. And the second are what I call the organizational ontology, and these are there are entities and signifiers and concepts that kind of create a graph within that company that's important to understand. And I learned from someone yesterday that there's a lot of baggage in the EA community around capabilities. So there's our capabilities. But I do think that it means something, and it's another tool that I use, so mentioning it in this day-to-day perspective. I love this quote. If I was to define one quote that has driven me the last couple years, is this quote by Cat Hicks that I find incredibly, incredibly inspiring. What would it look like if we could ask, how do I make this the absolute best environment for complex problem solving, instead of how do I take away all these annoying, hard problems? It means a lot to me, and that's why I'm sharing it as part of my perspective. In the last year or two, I always was sharing perspective as the latest news for me. I probably spent a good 10 years in the left side, the if I could just thing. If I could just visualize the work, if I could just define the terms, if I could just surface every perspective, if I could if we can align on goals, if we could use shared language. But then I went through the dark times, my existential period. But there's complexity, but there's system thinking, is it real? But there's a million different perspectives, but there's no system without an external system, or every problem is a nested solution to a higher level problem until you get to the universe on some level. I went into a dark place for a couple years, and then I'm slowly coming out of it, probably in due time, given the geopolitical situation. What can I do? So what half do I hold constant? What can I do? What must I flatten to be able to make forward progress? And this kind of sums up my current approach to these problems.
You can keep the clicker.
I will keep looking at it together.
Great.
Oh, you've got that one. There you go.
Yes. OK. Back to this slide. So next, we'll give you another two-minute version of our kind of shared lens, shared context. So I'll start with this. We have this person in DDD. We have this domain expert, which is this mythical person that not only has the expertise in business and in organizational design and everything, but this person has also top-notch communication skills. She or he is able to explain to anybody or any team the big picture and your place in the story, exactly. But we kind of all joke in the DDD community, such a person or these people do not really exist. So for me, the abstraction of domain expert really is a container for all the business complexity and organizational complexity and anxiety. And so if we look at our software systems, really it's like this inner circle. It has though this annoying trait that it's an open system because it changes all the time. And that means the outer system, the social systems, you can say higher order complexity kind of penetrates through the boundaries, making these inner technical systems less like a neat origami fold, but more like this tangle a cat plays with. And so I think we all have an intuition that every piece of code carries the traces of human communication, misunderstandings, constraints, and compromises, right? And technical debt is kind of like this thing, this human thing that creeps into the code and makes our code behave as if it has gotten on this mischievous and annoying and unpredictable behavior. And so what we've been exploring is really, but no, yes, but no, because both social systems and technical systems, neither of them is a pure tangle and a pure fold. There are patterns and there are dispositions that we can articulate and model, but we cannot treat that inner circle, we cannot treat the outer circle, human problems, and as if they were engineering problems, because that's a higher order complexity. So what this talk is really about is this socio-technical modeling. How can we do it really smart so we can tap into these connections, these things we're already good at doing, modeling practices, but without falling into the model traps, and thinking in systems without falling into system traps. Is that a fair summary of what we talked about?
Perfect summary.
And so these will be roughly the loosely coupled structure of where we're taking you today. And we're already at the end of step one. It's two rows, diversion and mass. And the second part is kind of like our exploration of the road less traveled by, which is a particular kind of socio-technical system understanding and modeling that can give us the hopefulness, but acknowledge the messiness. And thirdly, we want you to take away some tips for wayfinding. And we are not here to give you answers, but we are going to introduce you to some models you haven't seen before, and this is one. So normally in a conference talk, we implement the sponge model. Each of you is a sponge and of different shapes and colors and ready to be filled up with excellent insight from stellar speakers. And the unit of learning in the sponge model is the individual. And in there, it's totally legit for you to, to hide from each other. Remain strangers after this talk, right? And today, we actually want to suggest a small partial upgrade from the sponge model to the wave model. Waves are also individuals, but they do run into each other. In fact, if waves do not run into each other, there will be no ocean. So especially if the ocean is called a beautiful mess, we think the unit of learning has got to be both individual and collective. And so the invitation here is for you to think of yourself as not as consumers of content, but as active participants. The word participate actually means to take part. So we want your part in co-creating this learning experience in this room. And we are also exposing you to a risk, because as a wave, you are going to take the risk of running into strangers, which might make you feel uncomfortable in a conference talk. But, it's a mess, but it's going to be a beautiful mess. So let's do a quick check-in. Who here at this stage are willing to give the wave model a try together with us?
50,
well,
50.
Most of you. Some of them are still thinking about the sponge. That's good.
I think some people are in the coffee model.
Coffee model, yes. So, John, why don't we do an experiment?
Yeah, let's try it out. Let's see. Here, you saw my personal journey. I talked about all the things I used to just, and I probably still just. Well, we just need to this. We just need to do event storming. We just need to get people in the room. And then there's the buts, right? But have we thought about this? Did we get everyone in the room? Why don't you just spend 30 seconds individually thinking to yourself, what are your personal justs? And what are your personal buts? Give it a try, 30 seconds. All right, you've given it some thought. Turn to your right-hand neighbor, do a short intro, spend a minute or two or three or four just sharing your justs and buts. We just need to X, but what did we do? We just need to X, but what do we do? Give it a try for a couple minutes. All right, who heard a good just that spoke to their soul and made them cringe? Anyone? You just need to keep it simple, Shin. You just need to keep it simple. Just 3 bullets.
Yeah. You just need to run a collaborative modeling workshop with me to make it simple, right?
You just need to have triads and trios, and you just need to do the product operating model, and you just need to hire A players.
I think we should just do team topologies instead.
Oh, and you have to pick just one topology, right?
No, I prefer the enabling team.
Great. You get the idea.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, so we're already in the second part, which will be kind of an exploration of 2 topics. The first one is called decouple and connect. And Matthias made this point really clearly. From an engineering perspective, we would want our components to be loosely coupled and decoupled, because then software is more maintainable at a lower cost. But then from a business perspective, we want our stuff to be connected to make great products. So how do we decouple? Well, the DDD answer, a great technique to decouple is, again, ubiquitous language. And now ubiquitous language is really about 2 things, right? And it's an artifact thing, and it's also a practice thing. So as an artifact, ubiquitous language manifests as these expressive domain models, a system of domain abstractions that help us tackle complexity, right? And it connects the business language and the code language, and it needs to go into all these artifacts like code, test, documentation, epic stories, and even architecture decision records, and Simon's C4 diagrams like yesterday. And so, but it's also a practice. Eric Evans once said to me, ubiquitous language as practice is really a ubiquitous attention to language, right? So that means all of us, product managers, architects, and everybody needs to rigorously speak this language in order to make it alive in all our communication about the domain. So then some people would say, oh, ubiquitous. Let's make everything consistent for the entire business. I've tried this myself. I don't know, John, if you have tried this.
We just need to agree on our terms.
Yeah, exactly, for the entire business.
Just agree what quality means, and you'll be good.
But everybody can see that trying to get everybody to agree to the same things at this scale is neither cost efficient nor feasible in any sense. So the scope of ubiquitous, even the word ubiquitous is really misleading in a way, but the scope of ubiquitous language in DDD is really one small purpose bounded context. Why? Because language is easier to be made consistent and unambiguous in one small context. If you talk about account in the banking context, is it a user account? Is it a banking account? Well, it depends, right? So that's decouple. So when we talk about decouple and connect, how do we connect? So one of the approaches DDD offers is this thing called context mapping. And that is also a very language-oriented approach. So when we talk about CI, continuous integration, a lot of people think about techniques, pipelines, whatever. But that is really a linguist. Here we are talking about a conceptual and linguistic CI, in addition to the technical CI, right? But I just have to say that this context mapping is very different from what Simon talked about yesterday about context diagram in C4. Check it out. It's not the topic of this conversation. But then again, these dots are software dots. We have other dots to connect. Let's move on to the human dots. So John, you have written prolifically about connecting the dots in your posts. How do you reconcile this tension between decouple and connect?
It's similar and different. So I always joke as a product manager, if you go in with one roadmap, they'll say, go up one level. Can you go up a higher level? Then you go in with a higher level, they say, actually, could you get into more of the details? But you get into the details, they say, actually, could you get even further down into the details? In my world, it's about lots of connections. Connect strategy to execution, connect inputs to outputs, connect the end-to-end view of the customer journey, reporting lines, metrics trees, opportunity solution trees. We're connecting all day, but never at the right level. Never at the right level. We're connecting at multiple levels in the organization. I've reversed the triangle. The teams are at the top, and many different levels of depth, from specific words to visionary statements over courses of time, from 1 to 3 minutes all the way up to 1 to 3 decades for our company, and across many different frames. So things like the competitive frame, the socio-technical frame, the capability frame for your product, the customer frame for your product. This is a small list of frames. There might be 60 different frames or perspectives that product managers have to take consistently. I always like this drawing because on one side is the theoretical cascade. You might have seen this for the company. I call it the Parthenon slide. This one's a little different. It's visioned at the top, and you've got some pillars along the things, and then you fit down right in there, down at the bottom. This is an activity from last week with a major US retailer across 5,000 people and 500 teams about what does it look like in practice. You notice how most of the lines are going this way, right? It's a little bit of a cascade. It's somewhat of a cascade, but it's not really a cascade. Interesting. This is another activity. We looked at all the different interactions that take place between business people and different folks and their technical people are woven into this as you move along this map, but all the way from, how did it get here? Design manager, we had talked about I needed to, promise made to customer. Do you want to do research with this customer? Lead does advanced research, estimate challenge, blah, 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 blah. The green thing at the end is just, this is when the ticket got into Jira, something in Jira. So that's if you're thinking about your event storming activity. If you actually want to event storm how your organization works, you need to do a fair amount of sticky notes upstream. So at my current company, we sort of do a version of this. This is a service blueprint in a sense of how an organization works. But these are the layers in my world. And it's probably like your world too. I just don't know a lot about your world. At the top, you have activities and interactions, and then you have the actors, the humans involved. You have the rituals that the organization puts in place, the artifacts or documents that they move, the different workflows that are involved, the different views, the different frameworks, and objects, the entity things like opportunities and epics, are right down at the bottom. Those are actually kind of the least of my concerns. Those are sort of conceptual boundaries. And this is the stack that we're working at. Consistently, as a product manager, you're talking what I call these the sort of 4 graphs. You're talking about context, so customer segments, personas, jobs to be done, technology trends, partner ecosystems. Context is not linked to time, but context may change frequently. Most of us are familiar with the intent side, but a very narrow view of intent. The epic, the task, that's down there in your lower left-hand corner. Okay, there is a strong delay here, so it is difficult to use. I will not be using this. There we go. Okay, because then it will be annoying to you. So down in the bottom left will be things like, but think about the strategic pillars of your company, the themes, the principles. So that's intent. Investment are containers of money, and investment and risk, and collaboration are how we merge as teams. So in my world, when I think about the mapping, I'm thinking about mapping across context, across intent, across investment and collaboration, and these are sort of my units of measurement. If you take an average organization, down in the blue boxes, we have different teams. This is very similar to your world, but this is my translation of it. The team on the left wants to run experiments, thinks in KPI trees. The next team thinks just in terms of projects. The next team thinks in terms of options and opportunities. The next team thinks in terms of whatever they do. What are their signifiers? What's their ontology? You can't run a 1,500-person organization and ask each team to work a consistent way. Doesn't make sense. But you can create, in my world, the interface in this case might be a goal-setting method. And there are global objects, minimally viable consistency for the organization, like the big projects in the upper left need some level of global consistency because many teams need to work on them. The launch and release calendar needs to be somewhat consistent because there's a customer interface there. It needs to be consistent. The strategy, the opportunities, the North Star, and the drivers are things that allow teams to work in independent ways, but have that aligned autonomy in the upper right of Heinrich Nyberg's diagram. I joke about this. Probably all of you are like me. This is a thing of beauty. The more dots, the more excited we get. The more stickies, the more excited we get. But in my world, no one wants that, really. I just want to see my dot, not all the dots. I used to think my job was to connect the dots. It's not to connect the dots. It's actually to let people see the dots that they care about to do the work that they need to do, and that is about cognitive load. We don't want to overwhelm an executive with all of our particular dots. And then finally, my world is often about model negotiation, not about picking the right model. In this diagram, we have the team topologies person, we have the event storming person, we have the jobs to be done person, we have the flywheel person. Let me tell you, the person with the spreadsheet often wins, right? So when you can't agree and you're fighting your models, and then that person in finance says, by the way, we're going to actually fund projects here because you can't make up your mind what you want to do. This is the world, and this business world is about model negotiation, not necessarily about picking the preeminent model that one will use. I don't know how the team topologies person works here, or the event storm. There's a lot of stuff going on here.
All right, so that's the first cyclone. So the second topic is about the usefulness of models. George Box famously said, all models are wrong, some are useful. But as modeling nerds, we often debate with ourselves, should the models be neat and simple, or should they be rich and comprehensive? Which ones are more useful? Disregard if we like it or not, the most sticky and actionable models are those simple 2x2 matrices. They have a visual and appealing ways of organizing information, visualizing options, and even facilitating decisions. In this particular case, this is one of our all-time favorites in the DDD community, by the way. This is called a core domain chart, and you see the domains on 2 dimensions. How is it business differentiating? How complex is it? And then you can actually have a conversation to compose a subdomain portfolio kind of thing. And so I'm kind of wondering, what's your view on the usefulness of models? How do you kind of reconcile this paradox that reality is often kind of irreducibly complex, but rich and complex models like those you showed don't really speak to people, at least if they're not like us, our modeling nerds?
Yeah, I know that Shin's been tortured by a certain 2x2, so I'm going to leave it at that. So my Cutler's law of diagrammatic complexity is basically that an executive's patience for adding extra dimensions to a so a 9-box is actually functionally the most you can get an executive to think about because it's 3 times 3. It's the rule of 3, so you have 9 boxes to work with. If you extend to more dimensions in one diagram and there is a low sense of perceived control, then by definition, your diagram will not work with executives. So we have to be very careful about how we use the models and how we're using them in the context that we're in. I often think about these things in 3 ways. One is exploration. It's exposing the mess. The more, the better. And then there's synthesis and wayfinding, where we start to draw our loose boundaries across that. Remember, there's a difference between drawing loose circles around it and filling the circle with things. We're just keeping that in the back and drawing loose circles around it. And then there is when we are in the realm of persuasion, that we have to hide that particular mess to make the point that we need to make, because it is useful to someone to make the point we need to make, not because the other person is a lesser person or somehow not able to handle our deep brains, but because they need to have a job to do, and we need to help them do that particular job. All models and frameworks are job aids, to some sense, in my sort of language. Sometimes we use models to teach people, to scaffold and let them practice. Sometimes we use frameworks as a local interface. You know, I get thrown in with Kenny, and we've never worked together, and we'll probably pick a couple models just to have some language between us because we've got to get work faster. And sometimes it's a federated interface, similar to what I shared before, where you don't want the people really working together, but you need to agree on at least some basic consistent interfaces so that you can do what you need to do. And then finally, some models are just used as checklist items that they help you with quality. So the first question we ask is, did the model do its job? Are we observing more of what we want and fewer of the things that we don't want? And that's usually a good test. 2 examples from my life. Thank you so much. That journey mapping activity, John, was the single most valuable thing that we could have done as an executive team, a leadership team, game-changing. It's going to change the next 3 years of our company history. Relief. John, that was the single biggest waste of time and experience that the leadership team has ever experienced this year. Do not do that again. Both of these are valid, but we need to think about the tools. That was like Kenny's workshop the other day. It was great because each of these models has some kind of job, and we need to use these models very selectively. Here's 2 that I've used over the years. I'll actually kind of point out the differences. On the left it's on the surface, it's fairly basic, but it shows the progression of kind of interaction boundaries for teams as you go from maybe a more waterfall model to a product team model. There are some subtleties. There's a green loop, which shows internal collaboration with the team. There's a pink diagram that shows handoffs. This model did its particular job because a couple years later, people will say, I still use that model. I know it's oversimplified, but I still use it to explain this general progression we're on as a company. The model on the right is something called mandate levels I use a lot, which describes the goal of this model was to unpack the word empowerment. It's very easy for executives to say empowerment. It's much clearer if we create some words that people can lock into. Do you mean empowerment like build something that lets a segment of customers complete some task? Or do you mean empowerment of, hey, can you come back with $10 million in 2 years? That is a form of empowerment. That might not be what you had in mind when you asked to be empowered. Maybe you love that. Maybe there's people out there who would love to have the job of coming back with $10 million in 2 years. So the whole point here is these different models have different uses in different contexts. I did a lot of workshops with a company called Amplitude where I wrote this book about something called the North Star Framework. And we always started with the model on the left, which was very compelling. It's very simple. You'll have drivers for your business. You have a North Star metric that indicates an exchange of value and long-term sustainable growth. The reality of these activities was much messier, which is the example on the right, which is a real-world example from these things. So we're constantly playing with these differences.
Right. So I see some people are already yawning. Maybe your caffeine intake in the morning has already reached its some stage. So let's do a little splash of waves. So we showed you a lot of stuff already, a lot of content, especially John did a marvelous job. So what did that spark? Let's say 30 seconds. Reflection. What felt meaningful, insightful, or actionable? And what stirred confusion, doubt, or tension? When the 30 seconds reflection is gone, if reflection time is gone, we will signal you. Okay, I mean, 30 seconds in.
Oh,
okay.
they're ready to go.
They are ready to go. Okay, cool. Let's do
Just talk to your neighbor.
Let's do the splash. Turn to your another neighbor of yours and have a conversation in 4 minutes. In the best open space way, please raise your hand when you're done.
Nice.
Okay, we're never done, obviously.
Never done.
Right, so in this splash of the waves, who noticed that this conversation with one or two neighbors kind of helped you digest or relate to the content presented or give you some new information to think about? Okay, great. Thank you very much. We are reaching the final portion of this talk, which are sort of 3 wayfinding tips for navigating the mess. We'll start with this thing called keep modeling, but detach from models. So John, how is this framing important for you?
Yeah, I was thinking of my second law. It's Cutler's law of conceptual excitement, which is basically the more excited I am by something usually means less likely to succeed in practice. So I think that there's generally that there's a certain level of when you think you've cracked the code is usually a signal that you have not. You've cracked your own code, not the code for other people. When you've done that. And so this is just sort of if you wonder what I get inspiration for all my blog posts is usually something that failed as I'm writing. So I think that's one way. If you just anticipate this ahead of time and you realize you're more of a model peddler, or you're like a gypsy selling models from your curio cart, and people will mostly give them back, you can prepare ahead of time for the idea that most of these things will not work.
Right. Okay. So I think that sort of the models that get us attached mostly are the models that have worked for us in the past. Yep. Especially, if we have developed a kind of expertise in a certain area. If you have become a DDD expert, product evangelist, or North Star expert. So the late philosopher Jacob Needleman once said, "Our culture has generally tended to solve its problems without experiencing its questions." But I think that's not entirely true, because when something is new to us, like, we have this childlike wonder. I wonder what would happen if I get my team together to do an event storming. I wonder what would happen if I get the developers to do a North Star exercise. And so, but then as we get more experienced and more practice, we kind of see patterns everywhere, and we see solutions. We want to be fast. We want to be the fastest to get to the solutions. And so the message here is whatever model you're in love with, whatever field you have developed some expertise in, try to freestyle a little more in the problem space. Try to see if you can sustain that wide-eyed wonder a little longer. The beginner's mind, even if you have done event storming 1,000 times or 100 times, 1,000 is probably too much. If the previous slide is about experts, this slide is about change consultants or change agents like us, the people who want to make the world better in some way.
Or exercise their demons. Right. It's usually both, by the way.
Yes. And it is often so, my clients, are really not on board of my theory of their suffering or my model, how they should be fixed. And so then I get frustrated. How can you just not see that you need collaborative modeling before
you could just get the collaborative
before you
modeling.
can get to the target architecture, right? But then I found out, I was just trying to help, but trying to help is a model that isn't always useful. Because behind that trying to help is a desire from my ego to prove that I can help, I can enable. And so in my recent years' work as a change consultant, one question I started to experience deeply is that how can I both be that person with the expert knowledge my client needs and that person with so much understanding for their unique situation that I can declare the irrelevance for all my knowledge in their context and think of something new, right? So it starts to click for me that effective modeling is really detached modeling. And that means I need to stay in discovery mode and I need to hold on lightly to my favorite models and be always ready to kill my darlings. And in a strange way, when I can let go of expecting a fixed outcome from event storming, team topologies exercise, some other good outcomes sometimes emerge. And when that happens, it surprises me and humbles me. The second point we want to make here is that we need to learn to model conversations and belongings and connection before collaboration. And now, John, in one of your recent LinkedIn posts, you have this wonderful title called "A Love Letter for Physical Boards." So tell me, what can such a physical board do that a Jira board can't?
Yeah, this was an interesting. I mean, a lot of people have expressed some desire for the sort of physicality of these things that we used to use. But I was thinking a lot about what was actually going on and why were these things so special. So this is an example of a board that sat in the main hallway of a company, and it was the ritual that occurred at the board that was the effective part of these things that's very difficult to translate into many of the digital tools we use. And so the fact is that people were walking by this, and this has been my experience with other sort of change experiments that I've tried, is that physicality and integrating it into the rituals. So when you're doing a one-off event storming thing, or when you're doing a one-off offsite, that is not ritual. That's it's ritualistic if maybe they do it each year, but it's the difference about going back to the same concert year after year and seeing your friends and then going to see the big show once when you've never seen the artist. There's a ritual behind these particular things that are important. And the second thing is humans are very good at exception handling. It doesn't matter that the white ticket over there on the right is an epic or a story or a blank, a blank, a blank. A digital system would purge that out because it didn't fit in the model. So one of the things is when we look for this level of coherence in the activities that we do, what we're missing is it's actually our ability to handle the exceptions in what we're seeing, the activities we did yesterday at the workshop, the ability to keep scanning that as a group and saying, well, that over there we're not quite converged on, that over there we've converged on more. That's what makes these things particularly special. But in my world, it is about the level of interactions and the quality of the conversations that are happening as part of these rituals, that sort of ceremonial aspect that is very important in many of the activities that we do.
Yeah, and I totally resonate. And looping back to this ubiquitous language, how can we make a domain language ubiquitous? And now this is an example domain from Money Forward Vietnam. This is kind of a high-level domain map. So if you're a developer, how ubiquitous would a domain language like that for you if your only relation to it is through a company wiki? And how ubiquitous could it be if your only source of knowledge about it is through an architect who presented to you in a knowledge sharing session where you were kind of like, oh, I don't feel safe raising my questions and my doubts? And how ubiquitous is it if you were a domain expert and you were actually part of this collaborative decision workshop, but you kind of knew, the decision was kind of made before the meeting was even starting, and no one really wanted to listen to me anyway, right? How ubiquitous? So ubiquitous is defined by understood by all, right? So I
would say that there's a little bit like memes. The models that you're creating are like internal organizational memes. Mm-hmm. And unless there's a pull inside those things, it's very, very difficult. You can't force that language, but mimetic language travels in an organization and reinforces itself far beyond what you can do by telling people. So just notice, the Slack channel when people are posting their memes.
Yeah, precisely. And I think there is a myth that if you put people in the same room and follow a Como method step by step, then real collaboration and creative energy will flow. But really, how many of us have been to meetings where we feel, we're together, but I'm alone anyway, I don't belong, I don't feel seen and heard, and I can't really contribute when I kind of go home and pick up my kids, that kind of thing, right? So really, I think to really, if shared understanding is really important for us, we have to raise the bar from collaborative modeling to reflective conversations. And so we not only make the implicit explicit, but also make the undiscussable discussable. And I think we have all been to meetings with, this particular representative from the animal kingdom. Who is he?
The elephant in the room.
The elephant in the room, yeah. Well, for me, it's a metaphor. It's a container, again, for this, these undiscussables, these sensitive topics that everybody can sort of see and notice, but no one wants to touch.
There's a tip here. There's an elephant emoji in Miro, so always put a couple of those to the side, and then I do this a lot, build a little house. And then if they bring something up, say, I'm putting the elephant in the room, and you just drag the little room, you put the elephant in it, and you're good.
Right.
Keep going. This tip of the day.
Good tip.
Yeah.
All right. So another tip is that, just like we go to gyms to do reps to train our muscles, these kind of things, it is hard to call something out, right? But in Como Camp, I kind of offered a training session. Let's do some reps for calling out the undiscussables. And it worked kind of okay. I think there is kind of a blind angle in the back of our heads that if I am part of a meeting and something seems undiscussable, then I actually have a part in that thing remaining undiscussable. For me, that is a powerful reckoning, because if I can realize, I can recognize I have a part, I have a part in the problem, then I can also see the possibility that I can become a part in finding a solution. And so a solution would be calling something out with compassion, without grudge, without judgment, and that is hard. But I think that's a learnable skill, and we can kind of develop a social ubiquitous language that is an inquiry inventory in some way. And, we talk about coherence all the time in software. Coherence is this thing that parts fitting nicely into a coherent whole. And the complexity, theories like Humberto Maturana described what happens in full-throated conversations as experiential coherence. So conversation is a dance between languaging and modeling. And what I say in an open conversation is an invitation to participate together with you in a domain of experiential coherence. And what does that translate to? Social coherence? That is a feeling of, I belong here. I am contextually informed. I feel seen and heard and understood. I feel connected with the others in co-creation. And I feel powerful making my contribution to the whole. So if we can manage to model our working sessions in such a way, so the elephant stickers and whatever, right? So if we can try to model the connection before collaboration and connection before the content, then we might be able to transform the feelings of isolation, separateness, competitiveness, to feelings of belonging and relatedness. And when that happens, that is transformation for me. So in my mind, there's a subtle difference between change and transformation. Change is this disruption from the context. It is a destructive force. It causes things to fall apart. Transformation, for me, is almost an opposite process. In transformation, something is reconstituted. My old stories and theories and beliefs are replaced by new ones. So when I feel the sense of belonging in a group gathering, I can free my energy from taking care of my self-interest and my fear to using that energy to co-creating with others and contribute to the well-being of the whole. And that is transformation. And now Peter Block has the point that transformation is not something that you can design and plan in a Como workshop and then implement tomorrow. If we really want transformation, if we really want a future that is distinct from the past, there has got to be a form of that future in this very room, in this very present moment. And that means we need to model connection and belonging every time we gather. So he also said, how do you change the world? One room at a time. Which room? The one you're in.
That
And
would
so-
be this one.
Right. So if one person calls out the undiscussable with compassion, without grudge and judgment, then everybody feels that belong a little bit more to the story in the room. So, final tip, celebrate incoherence. So I actually proposed this title inspired by your writing. You write really a lot, and you make a point about why the need to coexist coherence and incoherence should be there. And once you said something really annoying and cold to me, you said, Xin, if your architecture is perfect, then you're dead. Can you unpack that for the rest of us a little bit?
Well, I'm not an architect, so if I say that, I was like, don't put that in the talk, because I'm not
Yeah, he
knowing what I'm
removed that
talking
slide.
about. I tend to think, I use this map a lot with companies when I talk to them, at least as a mental internal map of how things to fit together. You have strategy that guides organizational structure, which guides architecture, which limits your dependencies and creates agency and confidence and focus and impact and decision quality and flow. And you think of this as a system. But I realized after a while that there are bright spots and emerging seeds and fires across all of this. In fact, in any growing company I've been at, there has always been a mismatch between strategy and org structure and architecture. That's how we know we're growing. That's how we know that we're exploring new information. So the change is actually a signal that our stock options are going to vest well, right? I mean, to put the thing. So now this might be a little bit different if you're in a 30-year-old company and you've had a piece of software there sitting there for 30 years that doesn't need to do anything else but the thing that it does. But then why are you changing it? I don't know. For some type of reason. And so from this perspective, at any given time, there is incoherence in the company. And so when I'm on LinkedIn and someone said, if we just had a strategy, everything would be easier. No. If you have a strategy, that just literally gives you entrance into the room where you have existential dread about the future of your company and you're having real conversations about it. The conversations are not magically coherent. Prioritization is not magically easier. In fact, you're just having realer conversations about the incoherence that you're having as you're working through. I do these activities around team topologies, and I've never done one where a team says it's one topology. Pretty much always we're doing all of them to some degree. It's a platform team, but we haven't really gotten started as a platform team, and we have to moonlight as an enabling team. And oh, that one system, that's a complicated subsystem team that we have. So the world is never, that incoherence is part of their growth. The other thing is, I used to be, 10 years ago, I would say, this company doesn't make sense. The leaders say one thing, and the reality on the ground is not the same. That sucks. But I've come to understand that the tension there is what can create a new reality for your company. There's the official model. We fund work annually through value stream budgets aligned to our deeper strategic pillars. The real model, the projects got greenlit because a VP escalated it. That's what's real. The idealized present, which is teams autonomously prioritize based on customer outcomes. It sounds great. The translation work, you've got people in your company who have to reframe those different ideas. And the aspiring future, which is we're shifting to an outcome-based team-level model. If the tension, if the incoherence didn't exist between these frames, you'd be dead. Right? So there's always this tension in our personal lives with what we say we are and maybe what we're aspiring to be in our organizational lives. And so trying to seek coherence in all of these, all of you are probably very skilled coherence checkers. That's probably why you're here. But my personal life has been influenced a lot by being a highly skilled coherence checker. And it's caused a lot of internal pain, to be honest. And so it's taken a lot to come to the point where I need to let that part go in order to understand the opportunities that exist when there is less coherence.
Right. We're aware that we're a little over time. We are going to bring it home in just a few minutes, so stay with us. Okay, so social interventions in the human systems is a little bit like complexity jazz. So we need to have these clarity of written musical scores on one hand. We need alignment and predictability between these musicians, right? And at the same time, we need to give the musicians the freedom to improvise and to collaborate real time, and that's variation and emergence, right? No two jazz concert is the same. I think you can give me that. So that sweet spot in the middle called coherence, that is in perpetual movement. It cannot be controlled or predetermined. But what we can do with it is to create the conditions. What kind of conditions? Just to continue with the metaphor, one condition is individual skills, modeling, to be able to in some way model the mass, so playing an individual instrument. Another skill is the collective way of parts listening to the whole. Because if the saxophonist just goes solo and without listening to the others, and the drummer is out of sync, then there will not be a beautiful piece. And then they need to collaborate together. Those are all reps that we can do to become better at this. And when that happens, we can profit from this dance between predictability and variation without being annoyed by it, and we can have influence even though we have no control. And so, also for change agents and people who want to make the world for the better, we need to appreciate these paradoxes. Pushing our rocks up the hills and taking a selfie at the same time and posting it on LinkedIn to please the social media algorithm gods, it's just part of the beautiful mess. We just have to be more compassionate with ourselves. My son's friend just told me if a tree falls in the forest and it wasn't on Snapchat, it hasn't really happened. So, and I have a weakness for films and TV series that is about food. I'm a food lover. And The Bear is one of my favorite, and this is my favorite scene in The Bear. And so Carmi is a young guy who is opening a new restaurant, and he's trying to get the Michelin star, and he's really struggling. So he is at the retirement party of this lady called Chef Terry. She has several Michelin star restaurants in Chicago, in these big cities, and she's retiring, so Carmi was like, asking for advice. Chef Terry, what would you tell yourself, if you were where I am, struggling? And then Chef Terry struggled a bit and said, oh, that's a toughie. But I think I would say to myself, I would tell myself that you have no idea what you're doing, and therefore you're invincible. And truth be told, Zhang, this talk, our Miro board yesterday afternoon, was still a construction site with no clean build inside. And yesterday at 11, when you came back from the speaker dinner, we had to change the slide. And so I'm not saying it's your fault, but here we are. Here we all are, and the talk is almost history. I think we're living proof that uncertainty is a superpower.
Got to roll with it.
Got to roll with it.
So keep modeling, but detach from your models. Model conversations and belonging when possible. And I do think there's a lot of value in celebrating that in coherence. I've found a lot of personal success with, instead of channeling that incoherence as a setback, realizing that there's a power there that can be released into what you're doing, and that's very powerful.
Yeah, yeah. And so final note on this. This might not seem immediately actionable, but we put these notes up there because when we are at crossroads and when we are feeling stuck, even for us, detaching from our adjusting and celebrate incoherence is so useful. So, we are done, and this is the path we've taken. We do not have time to do the next group thing, but we want to leave you with a reflection question. What's one idea from this talk you could integrate into your work? And what's one question you'd love to explore further in a hallway conversation with us or with each other? We'll be here the rest of the day, I guess.
And day and night.
Day and night, yes. And that is all. Thank you very much.